All right, so today we're going to dive into photography filters.
Oi.
We're using this great Medium article. It's called Comprehensive Guide to Photography Filters. Came out this year.
Sounds comprehensive.
It is. It's got pretty much everything.
Great.
And I think it'll be fun to dig into what all these filters do.
Yeah.
Because even in the age of digital editing and Photoshop,
Mm-hmm.
there's still some really cool stuff filters can do
Yeah.
that you can't really replicate in the same way.
You get a better result sometimes if you do it in camera.
Right.
Just how the light hits the sensor.
Absolutely. And so as we go through this, I kind of want to pose a couple of questions to you, listener, just
Yeah.
things to think about as we go.
Mhm.
Did you know that some filters are more helpful for film than digital,
Oh, yeah.
even today?
Interesting.
And we'll talk about why that is.
Okay.
And then also, do you really need a protective filter on every single lens?
Mm.
You know, this is a debate I feel like every photographer has.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hear different things.
So we'll get into that. And then, of course, we all want to know,
Yeah.
how do you capture those, amazing shots of flowing water
Yes.
where it looks all, silky and smooth and, ethereal? How do they do that?
Right.
So that's one of the things we'll cover.
Right.
So to get us started, I think it would be helpful
Yeah.
if you could give us just a quick rundown
Sure.
of the different filter categories.
Okay, yeah. So essentially you have two main types.
Okay.
You have screw-on filters and you have slide-in filters.
Okay.
So screw-on filters attach directly to your lens.
It's like sunglasses for your lens, right?
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then a popular example of a slide-in system is Koken.
Okay.
And that one you have to attach a holder onto your lens first.
That's
And then the filters slide in and out of that holder.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with maybe the most common, I guess the ones.
That everyone kind of has an opinion about, which are the UV skylight and protective filters.
Right.
So what are those doing?
What are they doing?
Yeah, what's the point of those?
So protective filters are just there to protect your lens
Yeah.
from scratches or dust or anything that could potentially damage your lens.
Okay.
And then the UV filter is going to block ultraviolet rays.
Okay.
And then the skylight filter has a slight pink tint
Okay.
to correct for blue light.
Okay. So it kind of seems like the protective filter is the one that everybody is wondering,
Yeah.
is this really necessary?
Well,
And I know the article was talking about how, it's possible to get some image degradation or
Mhm.
flare because you've got that extra layer of glass.
exactly.
So is it worth the risk, to have that extra protection?
Yeah. I mean, that's a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
I would say if you're shooting in a particularly harsh environment,
Yeah.
maybe like a dusty desert or something,
Oh.
then yeah, maybe the protection outweighs the risks there.
Okay.
But, I mean, if you're just shooting,
Yeah.
everyday normal situations, then maybe you don't need it.
Yeah. I feel like I put those on and I'm always like, hey, I don't know.
Yeah. Do I really need this?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right.
And then what about UV filters? Because
Yeah.
the article mentioned that, a lot of modern lenses
Yeah.
already have built-in UV protection.
Yeah.
Is that making UV filters kind of irrelevant now?
So yeah, for the most part, I think
Yeah.
most modern lenses and sensors, they do have protection already
Okay.
built in.
So you don't necessarily need it.
Right.
Okay.
Unless you're working with a really old lens or something.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then skylight filters,
Yeah.
that slight pink tint that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the digital age,
Right.
you can pretty much adjust white balance
Right.
with any software.
Yeah.
So is that even necessary anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right. You can do a lot in post-processing. But there are still situations where a skylight filter can be helpful.
Okay.
If you're shooting in open shade or at high altitudes where the light is very blue,
Okay.
the skylight filter can subtly warm up the colors.
Okay.
For a stronger blue light correction, you can use an 81A or 85C filter.
Huh. Okay. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
choosing how much you want to correct.
Yeah, exactly.
I always think about before digital,
Right.
it was such a guessing game.
Right.
You'd put the filter on.
Hope for the best.
You'd be like, I think this is the right one. And then you'd
Yeah.
get the film back and it's like, oh, that's not at all what I wanted.
Oh, too blue.
Yeah, exactly.
Too orange.
All right. So let's move on to a category of filters that I think are really fascinating,
Okay.
which are ND filters or neutral density filters.
Yeah.
What is the deal with these? They seem kind of mysterious.
Yeah. So they essentially just reduce the amount of light
Okay.
entering your camera without affecting the colors.
So they're like sunglasses for your lens.
Yeah, exactly.
So when would you want to reduce the light entering your lens?
Right.
What does that allow you to do?
So imagine you're shooting a portrait
Okay.
and it's really bright outside,
Okay.
and you want that blurred background.
Okay.
But it's so bright you can't get your aperture wide enough.
Right.
The ND filter will allow you to do that.
So you can use that wide aperture
Exactly.
and get that like blurry
Yeah,
background.
nice blurry background, yeah.
What about those like dreamy waterfall photos
Yeah.
where the water looks all silky?
Yeah.
That's ND filters, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so how does that work?
So because you're reducing the light,
Okay.
you're able to use a slower shutter speed,
Okay.
even in daylight. And that's how you get that flowing ethereal look.
Okay, so it's the shutter speed is
Yeah.
what's actually creating that blur.
The longer the exposure,
Uh-huh.
the smoother the water's going to look.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how ND filters are like not just technical, they're actually like tools to like make art.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I keep hearing about stops of light reduction. What does that mean?
So each stop is going to reduce the light by half.
Okay.
So one stop is cutting it in half.
Uh-huh.
2 stops is cutting it in half again,
Gotcha.
and so on.
Can you stack multiple filters?
You can, yes.
Okay, so you could like
You can stack them.
really cut down the light if you needed to?
Yes, you could do an extremely long exposure,
Okay, wow.
even in daylight.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there are these graduated ND filters or GNDs.
GNDs, yeah.
How are those different from just regular ND filters?
So they're essentially an ND filter,
Okay.
but it's a gradient.
Okay.
So part of it is clear,
Uh-huh.
and then the other part will gradually get darker.
So is that mainly for like landscapes
Yeah.
where the sky is like super bright?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's classic use for them.
And you want the foreground to also be exposed properly.
Yeah, exactly.
I can see that being really useful.
Yeah.
And then there are hard GNDs and soft GNDs.
Yes.
What's the difference between those?
So a hard GND is going to have like a sharp, distinct line
Okay.
that separates the clear part from the dark part.
Uh-huh.
And that's really good for landscapes that have like a clear horizon,
Okay, so like an ocean.
an ocean, yeah.
Definitely.
And then a soft GND has a smoother transition.
Okay.
So that's better for landscapes where the horizon is less defined.
So like mountains.
Mountains or trees?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so it just depends on like
Yeah.
how gradual you want that transition to be.
Exactly.
So we've got ND filters and GND filters.
Yeah.
Are those useful for both film and digital?
They are, yes.
They are.
So even if you're shooting film,
Mm-hmm.
these are still relevant.
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so then we have a filter that I know a lot of people love,
Okay.
which is the polarizer.
The polarizer, yes.
Why is this one so special? Yeah, I love polarizers.
Yeah.
So unlike other filters, it actually has rotating glass elements.
Oh,
So you can control
okay.
how much polarized light is passing through.
So your article mentioned that with like SLRs, you
Yeah.
can actually see the effect happening
You can.
through the viewfinder.
Mhm.
That's pretty cool.
It is, yeah.
So like, what are some examples of where you would use a polarizer?
Okay, so anytime you have reflections,
Okay.
Glare off of water,
Uh-huh.
glass,
Okay.
wet foliage,
Okay.
a polarizer can reduce those reflections.
So like if you're shooting a lake,
Lake.
you can actually see like into the water.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. So you're not just like darkening the image. You're
Right.
actually like removing.
You're controlling the light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way the light's bouncing around.
Exactly.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the article also mentions linear and circular polarizers.
Right.
What's the difference between those?
So for the most part, you're going to want to use a circular polarizer,
Okay.
especially if you have an autofocus camera.
Okay, gotcha.
The linear polarizer can interfere with the autofocus.
Okay. Oh, okay. I've definitely done that before.
Yeah. You don't want that.
All right, so now let's talk about a lighting challenge
Yeah.
that I know a lot of photographers probably struggle with,
Okay.
which is fluorescent lighting.
Oh, yes.
Like that can be a nightmare
It can, yeah.
to deal with. And digital cameras, you can just like
Right.
adjust the white balance pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
But what about people who are shooting film?
Yeah. What do they do?
Like, what are the options there?
So for film, there are specific filters.
Okay.
You have FLD filters for daylight film
Okay.
and FLB filters for tungsten film.
Gotcha.
So you have to choose the right one beforehand.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll end up with really weird color shifts.
So you're kind of hoping and praying
Hoping and praying.
that you chose the right filter
Yes.
before you shoot. Exactly.
And then you get the film back, and it's like,
And then you're like, oh,
oh.
oh, no, I chose wrong.
Yeah, this is green.
And the article mentioned that like professional photographers will
Mhm.
actually use like CC filters,
Right.
color compensating filters to like fine tune that even further.
Yeah, they can.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
That's complicated.
It is, yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about filters.
Okay.
For black and white film.
Okay, yes.
This is where I think things get really interesting.
Yes, I agree.
Because now you're not, like, correcting color.
Right.
You're actually, like, manipulating shades of gray.
Yeah.
So, like, how does that work?
Right.
Can you give me some examples?
So, for example, a yellow filter
Okay.
is going to make the sky darker gray
Okay.
in the final print.
So it's absorbing some of the blue light.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, it creates more contrast.
Okay.
And makes the clouds stand out more.
So it's like making the scene more dramatic.
Yeah, it can. Yeah.
Yeah. What about like a green filter?
Okay, so a green filter is going to lighten the greens and the yellows in the scene.
So if you want to like emphasize foliage or clouds or something.
Yes.
Okay. And then red filters.
Red filters.
Those are like the really dramatic ones, right?
Yes. The red filter is going to block a lot of the blue and green light.
Wow.
So that'll give you like a very high contrast image
Okay.
with very dark skies.
So the sky could be almost black.
Almost black, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can really like dramatically change the look of a black and white photo.
You can, yeah.
Just by choosing a different color filter.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like if you're shooting black and white film, you probably want to have a bunch of different color filters.
Yeah, experiment with them.
Yeah.
See what you like.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then there are like special effects filters, right?
Oh,
like starburst and softening and stuff.
Right, yeah, those are fun.
What are some examples of like what those can do?
So the starburst filter is going to create those points coming out from the light sources.
Okay.
That's often used in night photography.
Yeah.
Like to make the lights look.
I've seen those.
Yeah. And then a softening filter will slightly blur the image.
Okay.
Give you that dreamy look.
Okay.
And then you also have like multiple image filters.
Okay.
That can create multiple exposures.
Wow.
In one frame.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's just like tons of different ways.
Tons of different ways, yeah.
They'll like get creative.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about one more thing before we wrap up this first part.
Yeah.
The article mentioned that, you know, using a filter reduces the amount of light entering the camera.
Yes.
Why is that important to keep in mind?
So, yeah, it's important because your camera's meter might need to compensate for that.
Okay.
So if you're shooting in manual mode, you might need to adjust your exposure settings.
So like wider aperture.
Yeah, wider aperture, slower shutter speed, higher ISO.
Now, what about cameras that have like TTL metering?
Right.
That's through the lens metering, right?
Yes, through the lens.
So for people who don't know, that's basically where the camera is automatically like metering the light and adjusting the settings to get a good exposure.
Yeah, that's right.
So are those cameras going to like automatically adjust for that?
Yes, they will.
Okay.
But you still want to be aware of it.
Okay.
Because you could potentially run into situations where you don't have enough light.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So even if your camera has all the fancy features, it's still good to be aware of how that light reduction could affect things.
It could, yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of different filters.
We have.
And I think there's kind of a bigger question here, which is like, in the age of Photoshop and digital editing, do we even need filters anymore?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Right. Like, can't we just do all that stuff on the computer?
Yeah, I mean, you can replicate some of the effects in post-processing.
Yeah.
But there are certain things that filters just do better.
Okay.
Especially in terms of how the light interacts with the camera before it hits the sensor.
So it's not like filters are useless now.
Right.
It's more about like...
It's about using the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
Sometimes that tool is a filter.
So can you give us some examples of things that maybe are still better done with an actual physical filter?
So one of the most striking examples, I think, is the polarizer.
Okay.
You can try to reduce glare and boost saturation in post, but you're not going to get the same level of control as you would if you use a polarizer.
So if I really want to like get rid of reflection
Mm-hmm.
and like really make those blue skies pop.
Exactly.
I should probably still use a polarizer.
You should, yeah.
Even if I'm going to edit the photo later. What about like those long exposure effects that you can do with ND filters?
Yeah, that's another good example.
Like I've tried to fake that silky water effect in post-processing.
Yeah.
And it never looks quite right.
It's because you're trying to recreate something that was actually captured in real time.
Right.
You know?
With the light and the movement.
Yeah, the way the light was hitting the sensor over a period of time.
Yeah.
That's hard to fake.
So you're saying like if I want to capture
Yeah.
Those silky waterfalls.
Yes.
I pretty much need an ND filter.
You pretty much do, yeah.
Okay.
If you want to do it in daylight.
So it's not just about, like, mimicking effects.
Yeah.
It's about, like, actually capturing.
It's about capturing what's happening.
Yeah, what's happening.
With the light.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like filters can actually enhance
the
digital photography workflow.
Right.
Like, it's not about replacing editing.
Yeah, it's not about replacing.
It's about working together.
Giving you a better starting point.
Exactly.
It's like choosing good ingredients.
Yeah.
For a recipe.
Right. You want to start with the best possible ingredients.
Okay, so by using filters,
yeah,
you're kind of like optimizing that image data.
Yes.
Before you even start editing.
Before you even open up Photoshop.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about it like that.
It's true.
You know, when I first started learning about filters, it was all about like, okay, I need this to correct the color.
Yeah.
Or I need this to do this effect.
Yeah.
But I never really thought about it as like actually helping me become a better photographer.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like helping me understand.
It forces you to think about light.
Yeah.
In a different way.
I remember when I got my first polarizer.
Yeah.
I was just walking around.
Right.
Like looking through the viewfinder, just like twisting it. And seeing how it affected like reflections in the sky.
Yeah.
And the colors.
So even if you're not like super into the technical stuff.
Yeah.
It can still be really fun.
It can be really fun, yeah.
To just play around with filters.
And you learn a lot.
So if someone's like,
yeah.
Okay, I want to get into filters.
Yeah.
What are like your top recommendations?
Oh, good question.
For like, let's say landscape photography.
Okay, yeah.
Because I feel like landscapes are where filters really shine.
They do.
Yeah.
So a polarizer is definitely a must-have for landscapes.
Okay.
It's going to reduce glare from the water and foliage.
Yeah.
Make the colors more saturated.
Uh-huh.
Make those skies nice and blue.
It's like that enhance button.
Yes, exactly. And then, of course, ND filters for those long exposures.
Yeah.
You know, getting that silky water.
That ethereal look.
Yeah.
Can't forget about G&D filters.
Yes, the graduated NDs.
Yeah.
So that's going to help you balance the exposure between a bright sky and a darker foreground.
Like if you're shooting a sunset.
Yes, exactly.
Well, yeah. And you want to see detail in the clouds and in the foreground.
Right. You want both.
What about for black and white landscape photography?
Right.
We were talking about how the colored filters can have different effects.
They can.
So, like, what are some recommendations there?
So for black and white, I love using a red filter.
Okay.
It's very dramatic.
Okay.
It makes the sky almost black.
Yeah.
And the clouds really pop.
It's like those classic
it is.
Ansel Adams photos.
Yeah, exactly.
Black at the super high contrast.
Yeah. And then if you want to emphasize foliage and clouds, you can use a green filter.
Okay.
That's going to lighten those elements.
So red for drama.
Yes.
Green for detail.
Exactly.
What about yellow?
So yellow is more subtle. It'll darken the sky a little bit.
Okay.
But it's not as dramatic as the red.
Okay.
So it's a good, like, all-around filter.
Okay, gotcha.
Black and white.
It's amazing how much of a difference those colored filters make in black and white photography.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it is.
So what about portrait photography?
Okay.
Any filter recommendations there?
Yeah, like, are there any that you would specifically recommend for portraits?
So one that I think is often overlooked for portraits is the polarizer.
Really?
Yeah.
We usually think about landscapes.
Right.
When we think about polarizers.
Think about reflections on skin, though.
Okay.
If your subject is sweating or they're wearing makeup, the polarizer can reduce those reflections.
So it can actually make the skin look smoother.
You can, yeah.
I never thought about using it like that.
It's a good trick.
What about filters that are specifically designed to, like, soften skin or create that dreamy look?
So yeah, there are those.
Okay.
You have softening filters, diffusion filters.
Okay.
They work by slightly blurring the image.
Okay.
But I think with digital cameras these days and editing software, you can pretty much achieve those same effects.
So it's not really necessary?
It's not really necessary anymore.
To use those filters?
Yeah.
But there are still some unique effects that you can only get with, like, specialized filters.
Specialized filters, yeah.
Or burst or multiple image or...
Yeah, color grading filters.
Okay, so if you want to get really creative and experimental, that's where you would start looking.
That's where you start looking.
You know, I think it's really cool how filters can be such a great learning tool.
They are for photographers.
They make you think about light.
Yeah.
And how it affects your images.
And I think that's something that even experienced photographers
absolutely
can benefit from.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you just get stuck in a rut.
Right.
You're using the same techniques. So trying out a new filter can kind of like...
It can spark creativity.
Yeah.
Force you to see things differently.
It's a good reminder to just keep experimenting.
It is.
You know? Always be learning.
Never stop learning.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the show.
Okay.
I feel like we could talk about filters forever.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about.
But we've hit like all the major categories,
Yeah.
you know, UV, ND, polarizers.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, now that we've gone through all this, when you're out shooting, are there any filters that you find yourself like reaching for more often?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
What are your favorites?
So I have to say, I'm a huge fan of the polarizer.
Yeah, I figured.
I almost never shoot without it.
What is it about the polarizer that you love so much?
I just love that immediate transformation it brings.
Yeah.
The way it can reduce glare and deepen those colors. It just makes everything look so much better.
So it's not just about making things look pretty.
Right.
It's about like...
It's about revealing...
enhancing what's already there.
Yeah.
Okay. And then ND filters.
Yeah, ND filters are great too. Especially for those long exposures.
Right.
Where you can get that like silky water effect or those dreamy clouds.
Like capturing time.
Yeah, it's really cool.
You can see the movement frozen in the frame.
And then, of course, we talked about the colored filters.
Right, the colored filters.
For black and white photography.
Which can be really fun to experiment with.
Yeah, and you get such different looks.
You do, yeah.
Depending on which filter you use.
Yeah, it can be really dramatic.
And then we touched on all the special effects filters.
Right, yeah.
Like starburst and multiple image.
Right.
It's amazing all the different things you can do.
It is, it is.
I think it's so cool that filters can be such a creative tool.
They can, yeah.
You know, they can be technical.
Yeah.
But they can also be really artistic.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's so exciting about photography.
Yeah.
You know, it's this blend of science and art. And filters kind of embody that.
They do.
So as we wrap up this episode...
What would you say to someone who's like, okay, I'm intrigued. I want to try out filters.
Okay.
Where should I start?
I would say start with a polarizer.
Okay.
And an ND filter.
Okay.
And then if you're really interested in landscapes, add a GND filter to that.
Those are like the core...
Those are the core essentials.
Okay. Yeah. And just experiment.
Experiment, yeah.
Have fun with it.
Don't be afraid to break the rules.
That's great advice. All right, so I think we've covered...
I think so.
Pretty much everything.
Pretty much.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for having me.
This has been another deep dive.
It has.
And we'll see you next time.
See ya.